The Last Prayer. Welcome to Dark Tales Chronicles, and I'm your host bringing you another spine-chilling story that will make you question what lurks in the shadows of faith itself. Dramatic pause, eerie background music begins. Tonight's tale is called, The Last Prayer, a story so disturbing that the Catholic Church tried to bury it for decades. This happened in a small town in Vermont, and what you're about to hear has never been told publicly, until now. The beginning Father Marcus Hartwell had seen many things in his 30 years of service to God. He'd performed last rites for the dying, counseled the broken, and even witnessed what some might call miracles. But nothing had prepared him for what would happen in the winter of 1987, at St. Catherine's Church in Millbrook, Vermont. It started with the letters. Every morning for 2 weeks, Father Hartwell would find a single envelope slipped under the church door. No postmark, no return address, just his name written in elegant, old-fashioned script. Inside, each letter contained the same message, written in Latin, Pater, tempus tuum venit. Ultima oratio expectat. Father, your time has come. The last prayer awaits. At first, he dismissed them as pranks from local teenagers. Millbrook was but the letters kept coming, and something about that handwriting gnawed at him. It looked familiar, like something from the church's archives. That's when Father Hartwell made his first mistake. He decided to investigate. The discovery. Late one evening, while the November wind howled outside, Father Hartwell descended into the church basement with a flashlight and decades of old records. The basement of St. Catherine's was a maze of storage rooms, filing cabinets, and forgotten religious artifacts dating back to the church's founding in 1847. In the deepest corner, behind boxes of moldy hymnals, he found it, a leather-bound journal wrapped in black cloth. The moment his fingers touched the binding, the temperature in the room dropped noticeably. His breath came out in visible puffs as he opened the cover. The journal belonged to Father Edmund Blackwood, the church's first priest. According to the records, Father Blackwood had died in 1849 under mysterious circumstances. But this journal told a different story. The entries began normally enough, discussions of sermons, town gossip, baptisms. But as Father Hartwell read deeper, the tone grew darker. Father Blackwood wrote of strange dreams, of voices calling to him in languages he didn't recognize, of shadows that moved independently of their sources. The final entry, dated 3 days before Blackwood's supposed death, was written in the same elegant script as the letters. The congregation grows restless. They hunger for something I cannot provide through Scripture alone. Tonight, I will give them what they truly seek. The old prayers, the forbidden words, the gateway between worlds. God forgive me, but I believe there are older gods than Christ, and they are calling. Father Hartwell's hands trembled as he turned the page. What he found there would haunt him forever. The ritual sketched in precise detail was a ritual circle, surrounded by symbols that seemed to writhe on the page even in the dim flashlight beam. Below the diagram, in Latin, were instructions for something called the Last Prayer, a ceremony that promised to bring forth the true shepherds to guide the faithful flock. As Father Hartwell studied the page, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The symbols around the ritual circle were carved into the basement floor exactly where he was standing. He looked down, and in the dust and grime of decades, he could clearly see the etched lines forming the same pattern from the journal. How had he never noticed them before? A sound from upstairs made him freeze, footsteps, slow and deliberate, crossing the church floor above. But that was impossible. He had locked all the doors, and he was alone. The footsteps stopped directly above him, right where the altar would be. Then came the voice, deep, resonant, speaking in perfect Latin, Marcus, veni ad me, tempus est. Marcus, come to me, it is time. The confrontation. Father Hartwell grabbed the journal and rushed upstairs, his heart pounding. The church was empty, just as he'd left it, but something felt different. The air was thick, oppressive, and every shadow seemed darker than it should be. He walked slowly toward the altar, the journal clutched against his chest. As he approached, the candles that he was certain he'd extinguished earlier began to flicker to life, one by one. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice echoing in the empty space. "Show yourself." The response came not as words, but as images flooding his mind. He saw St. Catherine's as it was in 1849, packed with townspeople, their faces gaunt and desperate. He saw Father Blackwood at the altar, not in his usual white vestments, but in robes of deep crimson. And he saw what Blackwood had summoned that night. It wasn't divine. The thing that materialized behind the altar was tall and impossibly thin, its limbs too long, its face a shifting mass of shadow and gleaming eyes. The congregation didn't scream, they knelt and worshipped, their voices rising in unholy hymns that made reality itself seem to bend and warp. Father Hartwell understood now why there were no records of what really happened to Father Blackwood or why half the town's population had simply vanished that winter. They hadn't died, they had been transformed, absorbed into something that existed between worlds. And now it wanted him to complete what Blackwood had started. The vision faded, leaving Father Hartwell alone in the candlelit church. But he wasn't truly alone. He could feel the presence watching him, waiting. The journal in his hands grew warm, almost burning. He opened it again, and new words were appearing on the pages, written in his own handwriting though he wasn't holding a pen. "You have seen the truth, Marcus. Your congregation hungers, just as they did before. Look around you, attendance dwindling, faith dying, people lost and desperate. Give them purpose. Give them power. Complete the last prayer." Father Hartwell looked out at the empty pews and realized the presence was right. His congregation was disappearing, people leaving for the cities, losing faith, dying off. The town itself was dying. But at what cost? As if reading his thoughts, the presence showed him another vision, his church filled to capacity, people from miles around coming to witness miracles, to be part of something greater than themselves. He saw himself as more than just a priest, but as a conduit for powers that made the biblical miracles seem small by comparison. All he had to do was speak the words written in the journal. Perform the ritual. Become the bridge between worlds. The decision. Father Hartwell stood at the altar for what felt like hours, the journal open before him, the candles burning lower. The presence waited patiently, confidently. It had waited over a century, it could wait a little longer. Finally, Father Hartwell made his choice. He closed the journal, walked to the fireplace in the vestry, and threw it into the flames. The journal screamed as it burned, an actual, audible shriek that shattered 3 stained glass windows and sent every candle in the church blazing higher than humanly possible. The presence raged around him, invisible winds tearing through the church, overturning pews, ripping tapestries from the walls. But Father Hartwell stood firm, reciting the Lord's Prayer over and over until his voice was hoarse and the supernatural storm began to subside. When dawn broke over Millbrook, the church was a wreck, but Father Hartwell was alive. More importantly, he was still human. The aftermath. Father Hartwell never spoke publicly about what happened that night. He had the church repaired, had the basement floor completely redone to eliminate any trace of the ritual circle, and continued his ministry for another 15 years before retiring. But those who knew him said he was never quite the same. He would sometimes stop mid-sermon, staring at empty spaces in the church as if seeing something no one else could perceive. He installed locks on every door and window, blessed the building weekly, and never, ever went into the basement alone. The letters stopped coming after that night, but Father Hartwell continued to find other things, old photographs that showed figures in the background that hadn't been there when the pictures were taken, hymn books with pages written in languages that predated Latin, and sometimes, on quiet Sunday mornings, he would hear something singing along with the congregation in a voice that harmonized perfectly but belonged to no one in the church. Father Hartwell died peacefully in his sleep in 2003, at the age of 78. His replacement, Father David Chen, found among his belongings a locked metal box containing a single note: "The presence remains. It waits. It will always wait. Guard this place well, and never let curiosity overcome wisdom. Some prayers should never be answered. M.H. The legacy St. Catherine's Church still stands in Millbrook, Vermont, though the town's population has dwindled to fewer than 200 people. Father Chen serves the congregation faithfully, though he's noticed some odd things since taking over. Sometimes, late at night, he hears footsteps in the basement. The locked metal box that Father Hartwell left behind occasionally grows warm to the touch. And twice now, he's found letters slipped under the church door, written in elegant script, in perfect Latin. He burns them immediately, without reading them. Because Father Chen understands what Father Hartwell learned that terrible night in 1987, some doors, once opened, can never be truly closed. Some hungers can never be satisfied. And some prayers, once spoken, echo through eternity. The presence is still there, in the spaces between faith and doubt, between the sacred and the profane. It waits patiently for the next priest, the next moment of weakness, the next soul willing to speak the last prayer. After all, it has all the time in the world. And somewhere in the darkness, in a voice that sounds almost like prayer itself, it whispers, "Tempus tuum veniet, your time will come." If this story sent chills down your spine, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Dark Tales Chronicles for more supernatural encounters that blur the line between faith and fear. Drop a comment below and tell me, would you have burned the journal, or would curiosity have gotten the better of you? Until next time, keep your prayers pure, and your faith strong.